Ever since I made the update on my T300RS and how it's performing after 6 or 7 years, I've been getting a lot of questions about my comments on the throttle saturation and what I do for my setup. First off, this is personal preference, and I just want to make it real clear that the pedals are performing just fine. With the overlay on the right and F1 in the background, you can see if I put the throttle right about 50%, it's reading 50% both on the overlay and the game. So there's no disconnect between the Thrustmaster drivers and what the pedals are actually registering in the game. The disconnect is between my personal preference on where I think 50% throttle is. So right now the game is registering 50%. This is Thrustmaster's true 50% throttle. Personally, it feels more like I'm only at like 40-ish%. I feel like I need to press more to get the 50. So what I do is I just press the throttle a couple times, and then without really thinking about it too much, you're not going to be super precise, right? Just push down your foot to where you think 50% is. So I just do this a couple times till it feels good. And I would say right about 64 is where I think 50% of throttle is based on me pushing it. So I go to linearity, I bump it up 15 because 64, 65 is 15 more than 50%, which is what I am basing my measurement off of. Now if I do my throttle thing again, you'll see I'm hitting much closer to what I feel is a true 50%. You can do the same thing with the brakes. Just try to hit 50%. The brake feels a little bit better. So I might bump that up about 5. Obviously, if where you think 50% in the throttle or brake is less than the 50% showing up in the game, then that's when you would increase saturation. Another situation where you may not do this is you find out of slow corners you have way more grip and you're having to get really far on the throttle even in low gears to get going. You might want to increase saturation, get some more power early on in the pedal travel. Conversely, especially with these super torquey hybrid Formula 1 cars, you might want to decrease saturation or increase throttle linearity just because they're so torquey down low, and it'll help you with traction out of corners. So I run right around this. It's not the end of the world. You just get used to it after you do some time attacks, and then you can modify it from here. As far as force feedback, I have all of the force feedback settings on 100%. So I run the steering wheel on maximum, and then I just use the game to vary the force feedback just because different games have different ideas of what 100% force feedback is. So instead of having to change that through the utility every single time, I just modify the settings per game. I used to run vibration force feedback at 100%. Just recently, kind of around the time that I made the video, I bumped it down to 80. It's just a little bit easier on the mounts and makes things vibrate less. Generally, I run on-track effects, rumble strip effects, pretty high, if not 100%. This is just because when it comes to at-home racing, the only feeling you have is coming through your hands, unless you have force feedback pedals. Then it would also be coming through your feet. But unlike a real car where you're able to feel the grip of the car and the balance of the car with your butt and basically your entire body, the effects are only coming through your hands, so I try to keep the effects as high as possible so that I can get as much feedback coming through as I can. Once again, this is complete personal preferences, and maybe for a game like Dirt Rally, you would turn this down a little bit if it's really shaking your table to pieces. Off-track effects, I turn this down, kind of nice to feel them, but it doesn't really add anything to me as far as the racing experience goes. On-track is where you spend most of your time, so I set up my settings for that. But yeah, I hope this clears things up. This is how I set my throttle and brake saturation, in this case linearity, to try and hit as close to what I think 50% is by feel, and you can see how off it is based on the overlay. That's what the pedals are actually reading from the driver, and in-game is what I have done to modify them to be closer to 50%. So it's not off by much, but every little bit adds better feeling and improves your driving. If you have any other questions, let me know.